In today's video I'm going to be having a look at some old telephones. I've been collecting a few of these things. Basically just want to get a collection of one of each type mainly, and maybe a few different ones, different colours as well maybe, but these are just your standard Australian telephones. I mean, ever since I was a kid we used to play around with these. You could get hold of some of these old second-hand dial phones which have got the old bell in them, so it doesn't want to go ding. There they are. And you used to hook these things up as extensions and stuff, even though you weren't technically allowed to. I think it was sort of in the 80s they started deregulating the system, because originally you just had to rent one of these phones from Telecom Australia and they wouldn't let you connect anything else to the network. In the sort of early 80s, somewhere around there, they deregulated a bit so you could go to Dick Smith or somewhere and buy an aftermarket like made in Taiwan type phone, and you could actually take this rental phone back and get, I don't know what it even was, but I think it's like $30–40 a year or something you were paying for one of these, and you get that taken off your bill. You just pay for the calls then. But I used to play around with those. I also worked at a place that actually did some work on telephones and stuff, and used to repair some from one of the local hospitals and stuff. And I used to get a few second-hand ones and do them up myself and sell them when they were actually worth something. Some of these just standard sort of phones, not really the dial ones because they were getting a bit old then, but more the push button ones because they were a bit more of a thing, because a lot of people still had the old dial phones, and I think if you were renting one of these they just sort of left you with it. But if you got a new connection they'd start giving you the newer push button versions. So I'll have a look at what's inside these. This is one of the really early ones. They did originally had the black Bakelite ones. This is actually PMG rather than Telecom because it was Postmaster General. Originally were the people running the phone networks, a part of the post office basically. It's an 801 model made by AWA / or STC, Standard Telephones and whatever it was. The British company I think were involved. 68 I think's the year. I'm not sure what these other numbers mean. It's got AWA stamped in the base, but this is one of the early ones because it's got this ring around the dial. No numbers on the actual dial itself. But we've got the old dial that took a while to dial a number on. And I think they said there was something like 3 different versions of these in these more modern. I think these are based on a telephone out of Belgium that's very similar looking to these. I think they're one of the better looking ones. The British phones weren't as nice looking, similar, but they were a slightly flatter design I think, and had a ring sort of around the microphone and stuff. And the American ones are different again. I do have one American one here somewhere. I didn't keep, even though I worked for a place called TR Services, which was a British company that did telephone rentals, was what the TR standard for. And there was quite a few old British telephones I got out there, but I just ended up throwing them all out. And you don't see many of them around anymore other than from that company. They basically had phone systems that weren't connected to the telecom network, so they just used their own handsets and stuff, and did have some dial ones and some push button ones, which I wish I kept one of each of those. But it's more the Australian ones I'm interested in. So I want actually, a lot of these are somewhat yellowed. I've got some really yellowed ones here which I kind of got just to try actually retro brighting things, and I have done one of these already. And the big problem is often they're like lighter in some places, darker in others. These are like the creamy yellow colour phone originally, that colour there, or you can always unscrew the caps off the handset and look at the threaded part, or down in, often this piece is always the same, but down inside there that should be the original colour, or even under that bit. And it does tend to, while it'll lighten up the bad bits, the darkened bits, it will also lighten and starting to white and bleach the parts that are the correct colour, so you've got to watch it a bit. But anything's better than having lots of dark patches. I did a white wall phone here that someone gave me years ago, and it came up pretty good. So the white coloured ones probably can't really be bleached any worse than their original colour of white, but these coloured phones a bit more difficult. So I've started pulling some of these apart to see what's going on. They come with a little circuit inside them. Not really a lot in there. There's a bit of a side tone transformer, that thing there. They're easy to, we used to just get a pair of pliers, break that off. The steel will come off that easily. I don't know if that's an aluminium cover, or they varied a bit the way they made them. But you could just snap that off and recycle it for Copper wire. This one looks like it's got a bit of corrosion in it. These boards vary quite a bit. PCA 268 AWA. Often they got those, well, the Swedish capacitors, the ones that like to die. Reefers. Often these are AEE capacitors in these early ones. The later ones all have reefer capacitors, which like to crack, but I've never seen one burn up in a telephone. When they're across 240 volts, they like to burn up in televisions and stuff. They seem to work alright in these. You've got a hook switch here, this big, it's a bank of switch contacts. Looks like two single pole, or two, yeah, single pole, single throw switches, and two, well, they're single pole double throw switches, I guess. So I've got the two contacts, and that is operated by your hook switch. Now the wiring's all getting in the way, of course. That's why you don't pull it apart. Side tone transformer, that's the thing that gives you a bit of feedback. It does do other things, I forget now exactly, to do with, I think, the loudness of the microphone over the phone line and stuff, but that gives you the feedback, so when you're talking on the phone you can hear yourself. Part of your voice comes back through the speaker part, or the receiver as they call it. They tend to call that the transmitter, the microphone, and receiver for the speaker part of the handset. But that gives you a little bit of feedback, because they do sound really weird if you have no side tone and you can't actually hear yourself in there. There's a couple of little mob things, metal oxide varistor type things. I forget if they're just for suppression of transients or what, but basically the circuit comes in, you've got your connections, well, this doesn't have a plug on this one, of course. Some of them are missing a stuff, but your standard, is it a 605 or 605 plug, 610 socket on the wall that these plugged into, 6 contacts. The later touch phones and stuff, they got rid of these two, because these early phones, it's always 2 and 6 are your main phone connections, tip and ring as they used to call them, I think. And number 3 here is actually the bell. So the bell goes down a separate wire in these early bell phones with the proper electromagnetic bells in them. And you had to have a link in the socket. The 610 socket that this plugged into would have a little wire, or a little, more like a little eyelet thing that went across 2 screws, and that would link your bell in. So it was basically made so you could disconnect the bell. Not really sure why they did that, but sometimes because when you dial on one phone, if you had 2 extensions, you dial on one, it would make the other bell tinkle in the other one. And yeah, the holy grail back then was actually a thing called an Anti Tinkle Module, which they could put in these phones, and it was some sort of little transistor circuit or something, potted in a little epoxy case or whatever, and that would stop your extension tinkling, because that was always nice, especially if you're a kid and you want to dial up your mates or something. You don't want your parents hearing it going ding 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 for every little switch contact in this thing. So no one even knew you were using the phone. Not that it mattered that much, but it was a nice little feature to have. And I think these would also make the electronic phones make a bit of a noise when they were dialing. There's not a lot to it. They have all the connections on these are unpluggable, so you can basically reconfigure the phone different ways. One of these capacitors, I think, should be your bell. The bell signal is AC. That should be the bell there, I think. Yeah, pin 3, and they show a little dome thing. And so we've got all these connections you can vary. So it looks like you could possibly link the bell in permanently. I don't know why you would. It looks like it also goes through the hook switch, because of course you want the bell to disconnect when you lift the handset up. But it's basically an AC signal comes through the hook switch, through a capacitor, so that blocks all the DC, so that path will only activate on AC. So they put like a 75 volt peak to peak, I think it was, or something, signal. These phones, basically the phone line was 50 volts DC. That powers everything. That's your sort of transmission line to get the sound across, and gives power to the phone to do its basic functions, all the audio parts to work, but they're all pretty passive. And yeah, you had AC superimposed on that, but of course when you lift the handset up, it basically shorts the phone line out, and that's how the exchange knows to turn off the ringer and that you're actually connected and either about to dial or you're receiving a call. So something in the hook switch here should short across the line a fair bit. We've got, yeah, well, looks like, oh no, that's actually where one of those metal oxide varistor things goes across the line, so I think that is just for transient protection, one of these little disc things. The other one is going through the transformer. So I'm not quite sure what that does. Looks like one of these hook switches. Are they normally open? Yeah, they're normally closed ones. Actually mutes the... Is that the microphone or the receiver? Probably the receiver, I think, is the top one. I forget which symbol's which on these. So that's got switch contacts across it. So I think when you're on the hook, it mutes it, because otherwise if there's any little transients on the phone line, changes in the DC, you'll get clicking out of the receiver part, the speaker. You can actually hear it on hook clicking. And what does the other bit of the switch do here? It actually connects, yeah, that's what it does. So when it's off hook, you've only got the bell-in circuit basically via a capacitor. When you take it off hook, this other switch contact comes in, it switches all your transformer and receiver and microphone, transmitter, all that in circuit, and that's what puts a very low impedance on the line. I think they're only running at a few volts because it's a pretty high impedance line. Once you lift this up, it's very close to a short circuit across the line as far as DC is concerned. And that tells the exchange either that you've received a call or that you're about to start dialing and you need a line out. And we've got, what, 1700 ohm. That's our bell inductor there. We can take this little dial out of here. It's got multiple connections, they all unplug. It's got 4 or 5 wires. And there's a little donger under there that hits on these 2 bells, and that's hit the AC signal, just makes this vibrate very fast. In Australia we have the sort of, I forget what the timing of it is, but ring 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 sort of sound. So it does a very fast vibration, ring, and then a delay, or just a stop, and then ring again. So we're not like the American that does a sort of a long ring and then stops for a while and then a long ring. So they vary on country, but that's all generated by the exchange. And basically these dials have a set of contacts in there, and when we wind it right out, there's a little tooth wheel in there, and it comes back and you can see these little contacts flicking. And when you go to 0, you get right the way around, you get 10 make breaks of that. It's actually normally closed by the look of it. When we're winding, nothing happens when we wind up, but when we let go, it opens it. So it'll be 10 times for 0, 1 time for 1. Just one little flick. And you could actually even dial with a phone if it was like a payphone or something, or well, it's more a case of not really a payphone because they had to let you connect to the line. But if you had, some of these phones had a key switch on them to disable the dial, so people couldn't dial out and make calls and cost the owner of the phone money, but you could actually dial with a hook switch. If you pulse it at the right rate, you can actually dial numbers with the hook switch because it just make and break the line. And which actual contacts is, that's the hook. So actually that contact there, that's the hook switch there, and the other hook switch, the one hook switch disconnects the bell, the other bit connects the rest of the phone in, like I said, and then yeah, that dial is actually across, so it actually makes and breaks. Yes, that's what it would be. That's why it works the same as the hook switch, because they're basically in series, 2 switches in series, though one goes through all the receiver and stuff, and the other, oh, actually does it. I think they're connected, and one goes directly across the line. I think the dial basically is connected across the line and then opens it, and then yeah, then goes through the hook switch, whereas the rest of the electronics sort of goes via a bit of a different path. But it basically does the same thing. The 2 switches are roughly in series, one goes through the other circuitry, one directly across the line, and that's why you can make and break it the same as the dial, and you can actually dial on them. That's always an interesting thing. We used to do it just for the hell of it. Looks like the case was made in '68, and these ones have this removable dial piece. I think you've got to slide that little metal piece out and this dial ring will drop out. And because I think there were at least 2 versions of this dial, and I think something to do with these numbers line up differently, so you could take this ring out, and depending, I think some of these were made in Belgium and some somewhere else, some were locally made, and I think that was the thing, that's why they had this removable ring. The later ones don't have a removable ring, but basically the same case moulding, but the ring's moulded into it, and they just had the one type of dial. I think one of these here, I think this one, well, it's gone too far around, that one's faulty. And I've got a second one here, which we can have a look at. This one I already removed the case and the handset from it, so I'm just going to have a look inside the handset. But this is, you basically just unscrew the two ends. This one's the one I was about to retro bright, and this cord goes up inside it. These later ones, they just push fit in there into a little clamp. I think these earlier ones mostly used a little metal clamp. This is an old carbon microphone. Yeah, this one's got I can see the back of the screw, and they actually clamp on with a screw and nut sort of thing, and a little metal clamp. So these carbon microphones are similar to the earlier bakelite telephones and stuff. They're very primitive. They go right back to the beginning of telephones basically. And it's just a aluminium case with a bunch of loose bits of carbon in there. Maybe we should rip one apart at some stage. Don't know if you can really hear it rattling in there, but it's got a sort of diaphragm. Even that might be aluminium, I think. And a bunch of little granulated carbon particles in there that when the sound hits it, they vibrate, and that generates a sort of voltage. So very primitive design. It wasn't until the model after the dial phones, when they went push button, that they finally got rid of these. But they were very efficient, worked over massively long lines in the old days when people were way out in the country over old copper wires and faulty insulators and God knows what. So they were actually pretty good. And that's the speaker part of it. Again, I think it's got, like under this aluminium, I think there's another aluminium diaphragm, but again fairly crude. It says STC made. That doesn't say anything on it. And there's just a couple of little spacer things to hold them in place. This one's even still got the hole for the clamp, even though it doesn't have one. That's got an STC thing on it as well. That's STC. So I'm not quite sure. I think STC, AWA, they sort of shared a factory or something. Not quite sure what the story was there. That's made by, looks like TP Australia or something, the plug. This has got STC on the board, PCA 1783, so this is a late one. Yeah, 1983, so they didn't go much longer than that. Not sure exactly when they went to the push button ones, but they did have push buttons even in 83, I think. We'll have a look at one of those as well. The old Oak brand circuit boards. And it's basically the same thing, but yeah, we've got the reefer capacitors. You can see that's cracking across there. The other one's actually still intact, I think. They say mini print on them, so oh yeah, it is a reefer. Yeah, it's definitely a reefer. I thought they were reefer branded. But basically the same setup. Dial's a little bit different. I think these are a bit easier to see. They've got plastic tabs on them. Yeah, it's got STC on the bell. Bit easier to see the contacts. This has actually got more contacts than the other one possibly. But it's got one that closes it. I think that mutes the earpiece, so it shuts as soon as you turn the dial. Maybe those earlier ones didn't have that feature. That's the pulsing contacts. Yeah, so you've got two pairs of contacts that shut. Might have a look at that other one. I would have thought that would have the same setup. It's got the same amount of wires, so it must have them in there somewhere. Maybe I just didn't see them. Oh, they're hidden down in there. So it does have other contacts. But yeah, otherwise you'll get a pulsing sound out of your earpiece. But these were generally pretty reliable. That's, I think, the first broken one I've ever seen, and I did buy these phones second hand as sort of parts only, so who knows what's been going on with them. But given this one's super cooked and the other one not so bad, I do have a better condition one of these with a slight crack in the corner that I'll probably put in my collection. These ones are more just for parts and stuff. I assume the circuits are roughly the same in these. Telephone 801, 802, 811 is what the circuit's for. What was this one? I didn't actually look. It's an 802. The other one was an 801. I'm not sure what the difference is there. What's this one? That's an AWA 81, 802. Yeah, I wonder why they changed the number. Unless it was just because these are a later version, so they didn't give them the same model. I would have thought the standard model number would fit everything. bell coil's a little bit different, doesn't have the plastic wrap on it. Other than that, basically the same thing, but what I might do is swap the case or the dial, one or the other. Dials, what did I say, 5 wires I think. Often you just like sit them beside each other and pull one wire at a time. Oh, they are actually, there you go, they are marked, that's right. So BN for brown, BL for blue, SL for slate, as they call grey. Geez, I haven't heard grey called slate for a while. Orange, OR, and pink I think should be PK, so they are labelled. And where's our, that's the handset by the look of it. Receiver B, probably RB, RA is receiver. But then we got, oh hang on, where's the pink wires go? MB, MA. So it's not a transmitter, or is that just, don't know, microphone maybe. Got PC, yeah, that's one of the links I think to the capacitor for the bell. C1 GS4. There is some telecom technical stuff on these on how to do various different things with them. Oh, we've actually got a transistor in there. OM616. Oh, interesting. So this has gone slightly solid state. I don't even remember them having a transistor. A couple of resistors. The other, oh, it's got the resistors and the varistors or whatever they are. MOV things. Yeah, I think it's otherwise the same, but they've added a transistor in, so that's interesting. And then you've got your line cord. I've got 4 wires. The black I think was pin 6. Blue is the, was it blue and white? I forget if they actually match the, I guess we'll have a look. I guess they should match the, it's usually blue and white with a pair used in the cable going to the socket. Ugh, bad corrosion there. Yeah, white goes to pin 2, blue to 6, so they are definitely the line. Pin, yeah, what's the black? Oh, black was 5, that's right, yeah, and pin 3 is the bell. So P1's the bell. B is like the kind of negative side, I think. White is like the positive. That goes through some grey wire. Oh, back loops back to P2. So they had, I think some of these terminals don't even go anywhere. Other ones are connected on the circuit board. Yeah, it's the bell, and the black goes over here. Yeah, interesting, that's hooked to that capacitor wire. So maybe they use the, oh, pin 5. Oh yeah, it does go. So the bell, I think that's where an extension bell goes between 2 and 3 if you leave out the link. Oh yeah, extension bell. It says extension bell, just had my finger on it. So that's right. So that's why they had the link, I think, so you could put an external extension bell there. And it came in, there's the bell, little dome symbol. P3 doesn't go to anything, so that's interesting. The little slate wire. Yeah, through the hook switch. Down here, then you've got the, yeah, that GS4. So it can go back out through the black. So the bell can go back out through the black wire. Not sure what for, or it can go through that slate link between C1 and GS4 through the capacitor back to the pin, the blue wire on pin 6 on the plug. So there's a bit more to them. I forget a lot of this stuff now. They've been a long time since I've messed around with old dial phones, but there was a bit of stuff you could do with them. So I guess we're going to have a look at this other one maybe and why the dial's faulty, and I guess it's a good one. We can pull the dial to bits on this one because I'm not going to bother trying to fix it. So yeah, another 802, that's right, 1981. Should be pretty much the same phone. I did get a feeling there might have been 2 versions of these dials as well, but I could be wrong about that. But I'll have a quick look. And then of course they made it like a retro, you could actually buy a retro fitted Dick Smith type dial to fit into these, a push button one. I do have one here, so I'll have a look at that after. I think there's a loose one somewhere as well. And then they made a push button version of these, which is basically the same phone, but push button, slightly different circuit on it as far as printing goes, but it looks like it's the same. Oh yeah, that's the other thing I was going to look at. Where's, if that's got a transistor in it, where's the transistor in here? Is it a transistor? It mustn't be a transistor then. Oh, I know what that is, I think. It's that, like a back-to-back diode, another transient protector, because they have those. I remember what we got now. Because these early ones have, yeah, that little piece, ITT CG2, whatever that is. It's some sort of, again, possibly to stop like a really loud sound spike or something damaging your ear or something. I guess they probably got it as a, in case it's a super loud sound comes down the line, that shorts it across the speaker and to ground type of thing. And I reckon that is what that little transistor thing was in the other one. Now this one doesn't have it by the look of it. This has got an older board, maybe PCA 17 AWA. Oh my god, we've got an Anti Tinkle Module. Yes, bonus. ATM must be connected in series with the bell circuit. Oh my god, we actually got one. So someone didn't check this phone before they sold it, because normally you'd pinch that out there. Ah, excellent. Yeah, stuck on top of our reefer caps. Anti Tinkle Module S311/330 AWA contract number. A lot of things had contract numbers for Telecom Australia. I would leave that out because that's faulty. Oh, that's actually got a red thing here. So yeah, that's in the same position as the other one, I think. So that's what that little OM thing is. It's not a transistor at all, even though it's got 3 pins on it. Maybe the other one's just to stabilise it. That is, so this one won't have one across the thing because it's got a red one. Yeah, nothing. So it saved a bit of assembly in the factory, I guess, which makes sense. Makes it more complicated to just connect the thing up, and it is a pain because I pulled one to bits to retro brighter, and yeah, then it's fiddly to get that little piece back in, so they just moved that to the board. Yeah, wow, Anti-Tinkle did that. I think a double-sided tape to stick it down, and that just goes in line with the bell circuit. And I forget, someone did have a circuit of one somewhere, I think on Facebook, on one of the telecom or phone pages, someone actually had a circuit of what's inside that thing. So you probably could make one if you really wanted to, but we never had that back in the day. We just had this little potted box. Here you can see it. You can see the circuit board and some solder blobs inside there. It's all in epoxy resin. So what has happened to this thing? Is it just, it's not just loose, it's very unhappy. That should just pop off, I think. Yeah. Oh, we've got a broken piece. Oh, now it works. Oh, maybe that was all that was wrong with it. Doesn't feel great. No, it doesn't return. So it's just like a clock spring type wound up spring in there. There's a little speed regulator. That's right, there's a nice little gold brass ring you can pinch out of these. So it's quite a primitive bit of technology, really. That's a little, is that a little, oh, that's the bit that flicks the switch. So that pulls back and pushes on the switch, or doesn't affect it, and then as you come back around there's a little plastic bit sticking up that push on that, and that opens the contacts. These contacts stay closed and then they open again, so they short out the sound so you can't hear it pulsing away. What's that piece off? Is that even part of this thing? Ah, it's part of the outer, that's right, it's the little piece broken off there. That's right, you can wind this plastic bit, backing bit off, and this just undoes with normally they have a little plastic cap to hold your label with your phone number on it. Someone's had this apart by the look of it, because that's loose. You can just take that dial off, and then of course here you can actually pull this white plastic bit off. You have to rotate, I think you have to rotate it by the look of it. And one of our little pieces is snapped off it. And that's what you often do. If you want to clean one of these, you need to take this piece off usually these days, because they're absolutely filthy, and clean all around this part. Does that sort of locate? Well, that could be part of the problem. Yeah, it's got to locate in 3 little lugs there. It may be a bit iffy because it's not locating properly and things are slipping, so I'll tighten that right back up. It's interesting, maybe that little black broken bit was just jammed in there somewhere. I think it's actually fine. working. See, I used to have I built a kit out of electronics, or not a kit really, but a project out of Electronics Australia that it was an answering machine tester, which allowed you to power up 2 devices. It could be answering machines, fax machines, or a telephone or two, and basically press a button would make them ring. So like for an answering machine, obviously you need it to get so many rings before it'll answer, and then you could have a phone on the other outlet and talk to it and test all the functions that it was recording, that it was answering, that it was playing back its message, that it was then recording your message. And that was really handy for testing these things, because there's no analog phone system here anymore. You can get an analog telephone adapter to go off the internet, but I don't think it supports necessarily ringing these bells. It may do. I think it'll run all the electronic ones, and it probably won't support what they call decadic dialing, compared to, you know, your modern phone's got the tone dialing, whereas this, it's got the make and break switch, so it's up to 10 pulses, I guess. And I don't think most systems actually support that, though. I think someone might have said there is an adapter you can buy to go from decadic to pulse. The pulse system just has like 2 tones, dual tone multi-frequency as they call it, DTMF, and each time you press a button it's like a matrix of a particular tone that it connects to another tone, or connects the voltage to make 2 tones go at once. So that's the modern way of doing it, whereas these actually pulse the exchange and would make like a stepper switch. What do they call it? Stroger switch, isn't it? Make them pulse each time, electromagnetic switch. So each pulse this thing delivers down the phone line would make a switch actually step. Electromagnetic switch, would put a pulse into that, and it's like a relay but with multiple contacts that would wind its way around, something like a uni selector but a bit different, because then I think when the first number had gone through, it would connect to something, and then it would wait for the next one, and then so it could actually slide across and rotate these switches in the exchange. Quite a amazing system they had. And when the place I worked at TR Services there, they had actually uni selectors. They often used them in things like time systems, and part of that would be to sound horns for the beginning and end of shifts at factories and stuff. And they were like this big bank of rotary switches. I forget how many terminals they had. They had multiple contact banks across, but each time you pulse the coil on it, it would rotate slightly. And I think they were like maybe 20 contacts or something, quite a few. And yeah, in the old days they'd use them for kind of switching logic type things. And you had all sorts of operations that were quite complicated you could do with them by connecting all these contacts in series and slowly pulsing them over time until the contacts lined up on one bank with another one, and you'd wire links you'd have to set between them. I actually reprogrammed one once. God knows how I did it when I was only an apprentice, but somehow I managed to reprogram one to change the times on it. But you basically had to change all the links in these things. They did have a pretty decent manual on it, I think, and then one of the old techs here gave me some advice, a guy who came in part-time while someone else was on holiday. But yeah, these things were very sort of manual labour and wiring and stuff to set everything up in the old phone exchanges and stuff. But yeah, very interesting system. There are some good videos on YouTube of how the old manual exchanges work, or automatic exchanges as they were. Manual exchanges were the ones where there was a lady actually would receive your call and plug in some plugs to connect you to the person you want to talk to. Whereas the early automatic exchanges, all electromechanical, and they'd allow this dial to talk to the exchange, which would then connect you through to, I think the first digits would select what town, which could be your local town or it could be somewhere else, and then it would be just like the local subscriber number sort of thing with the last few digits, and these switches would link you through until you got to, I guess, the correct line, and then they'd start up a machine to send a ringtone down to that person, and you wouldn't get finally connected to them until, I think they were like 2 mirror systems. So you would dial the number, that would then select the number for the other person's line, send a ringtone to them, and if they answered, then you'd finally get actually connected to them. So yeah, quite an amazing system really, but very effective, and they worked for years, no problems at all. But anyway, that's inside that one. That's the wrong cover, I think. That was the lighter one, and I think that's a goer now. So I think that one is the one I'll probably retro bright. The other one I think might just be a parts phone. And we'll have a look at one of these later ones, which is probably only good for parts. And this is basically the same telephone, but with some rather crude buttons on it. There was actually a white keypad version, which is slightly earlier. I think they came out in a grey and cream colour like this one. This is almost white. I think it's more ivory than cream, so it's a slightly lighter colour than the other one. Yeah, so 1979, they're that early. God, so these were in parallel. Those were both 80s. I say that 83 dial phone would have been one of the later ones. But these you had to pay a heap of extra money to rent them. They weren't standard equipment at all, I don't think. Made by STC for Telecom Australia. It's an 805. I think all the early ones are 805. Then they went to the 807, which has the extra buttons. So that's how you tell them apart. This one looks like it was the Switch model, but usually they had a /1 8051 or something, I think. But unless someone else has drilled a hole in this, it does look a bit crude. Because they made a version with a switch for PABX systems. I think it was like an Earth Recall or something, which wasn't used domestically at all, I don't think. And that's why some have an extra switch on them. That's for business systems. We'll have a look at this. This should basically be the same thing. PCA 279 STC. This board's basically the same. Doesn't even have, oh, it does actually, it has a little black thing down there. It's hidden away there. So that's the little piece that went across the receiver. So they have started mounting on the boards in 79. And we've got this amazing old setup with read relays and stuff it should have on it. And some ancient chip, gold plated chip by the look of it, AY-5-9100. Little pop core type inductor thing there, heap of transistors in the old metal cases. And there's your read relay and a second read relay, which basically does the equivalent of those contacts in the other dial that we looked at, the electromechanical one. Well, it's really just mechanical. And these do the job. I guess one probably mutes your receiver and the other one does the pulsing. And these are decatic only, so they only put pulses down the line exactly the same as the dial phone. Pretty horrible. Look at this great big mechanical assembly. Oh, actually, that might be the mute switch there, come to think of it. So it's got a mechanical muting switch, which is why these are really horrible to use. They might have been a bit better in the day because they got a lot of dust and stuff in since, makes them a bit stiffer than they should be, I think. But I've never touched one of these even years ago that was nice to use. But these were quite rare in Tasmania for some reason, probably because we didn't have so many businesses, and I don't think the average person was willing to pay, like especially family people, that willing to pay the extra. I forget how much it was a month, but quite a bit of money for those days to rent one of these ones, and for very little extra convenience really. Made dialing a little bit quicker, but unless you're a secretary in a business or something, dialing speed really didn't matter much. You're talking a extra minute or few seconds or whatever, tens of seconds I guess, compared to using one of these. But yeah, pretty horrible. I think these are all just the same inside the handsets. Carbon microphones, they're very primitive still, but just the same phone, still a bell in it. And yeah, nothing that exciting to see in there. I guess we'll have a look at one of the actual aftermarket dials you could get for the dial phone. And I don't think most of them were actually Telecom approved, but it didn't stop people buying them. I'll have to find out, see if I can find a Dick Smith ad. I think they're in one of the Dick Smith catalogues I got. But you could buy an aftermarket dial to replace the other rotary dials. Obviously they don't fit in these phones, they fit in the round hole. And this is a phone that has one. I only bought this phone because it has one in it. This could actually do, this was a white coloured one. You can just make it out there, white cord on it. Often the cords give away the actual colour of the phone because they don't always go as bad, and it's got a split in the cord which isn't too good. But I might electro bright this one as well. I had quite a bit of success on the other one I had, which had all brown right down one side on one side of the handset. This one's only just lightly stained. It's almost not worth doing. But these were your typical aftermarket one. Most of them had that LED, which I'm not sure what the LED actually did. don't know if these had a hold button. Some of these you could like press one of the buttons and it would mute the microphone and you could put it on hold. So this is the wall version of these phones. What is this one? A PMG 891 AWA 72. So I assume that's the year it was made. And yeah, for years they had basically, this is if you wanted a wall mounted phone rather than a desk one, you'd have to get one of these. The house I'm in at the moment had a blue one on the wall originally, light blue colour one of these, and these things are just made to fit in. It's got a little inspected label, probably from Taiwan or somewhere. Another inspected label, quite a big chip in this one, little read relay again. Quite a bit less electronics than the Telecom one, but these were made a little later. These are getting into the 80s. Looks like we've got a spider living in that one. How did that fit? Not that way. That way, I guess. No, that's the cord hole. Ah, there it is, a little locating tab. I thought that must go somewhere. Other than that, there, our reefer's just about disintegrating there. Big slab of epoxy resin there, peeling off, taking some of the foil with it by the look of it. Quite a bit of a different board in this, PCA 972 from AWA. But basically does the same functions. Probably got a circuit in this thing, has it? There you go. I think it's the same circuit pretty much. Yeah, it looks basically identical. A little bit of fly screen there to stop anything getting in there, I guess. I think it's just plastic fly screen type mesh. And these were designed so you could hang the handset up on that piece there when it was on the wall. So quite a good design. So if you're talking to someone and you had to put the phone down, obviously you couldn't put it on a desktop or something, because this thing would just normally be mounted on a plaster wall or something, maybe above a kitchen counter or something where you could sit the phone down. Sometimes just on a wall with absolutely nothing below it, and up quite high. So they made it so you could actually rest the handset there without hanging up, because if you put it back in its normal position, of course you'd end the call and then you have to pay for another call. So that was, they thought of everything with that, and they kept this design into the push button versions. They never made one with anything like this in. So these, while these push button desk phones were out, the 805 and onwards, they did not change these as far as I know. There was never a wall mount version of those. The only way you can make these ones push button or have a push button wall phone up until mid 80s or thereabouts was to fit one of these aftermarket things in there. But they were quite a good seller, I think, those. And this is the next version. It's got the full set of keys, but the same, otherwise same keypad. That does feel a little bit better than the other one. I think these are a little bit softer to use, but not necessarily. And it is an 80, oh, it's still an 805. I thought these had changed to the next model, but they haven't. Of course, the 807 is the plastic one. So this is 1982. So they started adding in the hash and asterisk key. Not sure if they really did much on your normal home phone line, but maybe they had some of these. The main reason they were used is one of these might actually be last number redial. So it's possible. They didn't have any memories or anything in these, as far as I know. They just possibly a redial. About the only extra functions you really wanted was redial and mute button maybe. And again, we're probably basically the same circuit, except we don't see the dial contacts. We've got a push button sending assembly, 805, 806 Mark III. Oh, there is, yes, there was an 806. That's the one I'm thinking of. There must have been an 806 model. I thought there was one more model. Oh, this is quite a bit more modern, this circuit. Looks like it's got an Alps keyboard in it. Yeah, it doesn't have that horrible sliding contact assembly. That's why they feel quite a bit better. It doesn't have that big plate to move anymore, which gets all dust and stuff in it and gets friction. MH321 IC, NEC Tokyo. One little read relay rather than two. That's like a, yeah, MOV1, it even says MOV1. surge protector type thing, metal oxide resistor. It's got a 3.5795 crystal. A lot of things use the American television colour crystal because they were cheap and plentiful, mass produced obviously, so a lot of chips would use those just as a clock crystal because, like I say, plentiful and cheap. You've got a bridge rectifier because all this electronics runs on DC, but the phone line's AC. Looks like a German type, what's it, ROE electrolytic capacitor. Used to find those in German TVs and stuff in these plastic cases. They were going to standardise all their caps, I think, to certain spacings. I forget what the standard was now, but a few of them made it to Australia, and they're probably BC transistors or something. No, it's FHPS, I think. Looks like someone's replaced one of the old reefer caps, probably because it fell to bits, or maybe that's just what they had in stock at the time, and another ERO, whatever they are. So that's the only slight difference. These, I think, again, still have the same old, same old receiver and everything. What have they got? Oh, they're going back to the black device with circuit board mounted, but yeah, much nicer. Still a pretty crude keypad, needs a fair bit of force, but a definite improvement. And again, all Decadic dialing at this stage still. That remained the standard. So this just, you press a button and you got a little chip in there that then counts out the appropriate number of pulses and basically uses that read relay to do the pulsing instead of the mechanical dial. So it's just a more complicated way of doing the same thing. So no real technological advancement, but like I say, if you were someone making a lot of calls every day, it'd be a lot easier just to go on these, I guess, rather than having to wind each time. But of course these take nearly as long to dial as a normal dial anyway, because they've got to pulse out up to 10 pulses. So they weren't much quicker overall, but still a lot nicer to punch the number in. And this is the next major model, which jumps to 807. These were the first commonly rented out phones to completely replace the old dial phones. These became standard equipment. September 86. I don't think they really go much earlier than 86, these phones. Maybe 85, but it's around that era. And yeah, STC remains the property of Telecom Australia because it's a rental phone. They never sold these. We're now down to a single screw, plastic base. And finally, an electronic ringer in it, but these are still Decadic. So still Decadic dialing, much nicer keypad, very light press, or lighter than the other ones. Maybe not as light as the modern ones, but they're nice to use. Another Alps made keypad, so these are super reliable. Yeah, these have the little speaker in them, a proper electromagnetic type speaker in them. The later ones, that went to a piezo. And these cords actually plug in via modular connectors. They're only the little 4-pin ones for both line and handset, whereas later phones, when the customer could access them, basically they went for the 6-pin, the wider plug, so you couldn't mix them up, whereas these were never meant to be accessed by a consumer. So they're the same. Smaller switch there. Still got one of those other mob things. That's probably your two other ones here. For protection, got a bridge rectifier now as the main part of the phone. No circuit given to you in these. Absolutely nothing inside that bit. Probably didn't want anyone to know how they work. That's probably your coupling cap to the... Again, you've still got to have a capacitor for the bell, so that basically filters out AC, so the bell only operates when there's AC. Is that our bell? I seem to remember it being a different number, but the electronic ringer, yes, it's got a separate bridge rectifier, I think, one for the main electronics in the phone, and a separate one which goes via that capacitor to run the electronic ringer. Yeah, they used to be an 8205 or something, I see, mainly, but this one's a TA31002, so maybe that's like a Toshiba version or something. They did change parts in these things quite often. Is that a PDC3321 IC or MSM86011? Probably came with multiple numbers. Still got the European style ROE capacitor, little Phillips type of pot. Could have been made by anyone. Looks like it's got some other brand on there, and that's your ringer volume underneath. So that was all variable via a pot. I think that capacitor transformer is a coupler to the speaker, so which is probably why, because it's probably a high impedance output on this chip. Why they use speakers in these, I'm not sure. Maybe they're just cheaper or something. But then you've got to have a transformer. And you've still got a side tone transformer as well. So they still do that the old sort of electromechanical way of using an inductor to put some of your speech back into the handset. And these should have the same old, a bit of plastic stuck to it, but little spacer thing, same old receiver. Oh, it's actually got the thing back on there. That's interesting. Huh, how weird, they went back to putting the piece across the actual thing instead of on the circuit board. Assuming this one's in original condition. I wouldn't have thought they would have bothered, but maybe they do. I'll have a look inside another one just to be sure about that. But these have got an electronic microphone in them, made by NEC. And I think Electronics Australia did an article on these, because as soon as I saw that I had to find an old one and pull it apart. So basically it's a crimped on type aluminium plate on these, but it's got a little hole there, and there's actually a dynamic, like, electromagnet, I guess, type microphone and some electronics in there, little preamp and stuff. So I might pull one of them to bits, because they're fascinating to have a look at. You think it's just a plastic and a bit of plastic and aluminium, but there's actually some electronics in there. And I have not looked at one since probably the 1980s. I just had, once I knew there was electronics in there, of course I had to have a look. But that's basically that model. This one's pretty yellowed and horrible, and only really good for parts. You've got a little, that's where your number goes in there, you just bend it sideways. And usually they came with the manual that came with these. There's a little set of labels in there that you put in there, often missing, or people want to get rid of their numbers before they got rid of the phone for some reason, so they pulled them out. But yeah, a lot lighter, no more jangly bells, and a bit more modern. Same big handset though. This is basically, even though it's got the more modern mic, it basically feels the same as all the earlier sets right back into the 60s, or not sure when they got rid of the Bakelite phones, but I think they went into the 50s, and then they went for this style, the Belgian style metal based ones, but it saves quite a bit of weight. You don't really need the base to be a solid metal anymore once you've got rid of that ringer, because that was, I believe, all part of the resonating sort of system. Whereas if you've just got a piezo speaker, and this one's got the little switch in it for the PABX recall or whatever it was, and this should be 809, is it? 809 S1 means it's got that switch. Some of the earlier phones just had a /1. This is 1986. Is that what the other one was? I think it was. Yeah, another one from 86, but this has got week 38 is what that number means. The other one just had September. So you've got to check it on the calendar. That probably is around the same time, so it would have been made at a similar time to the other one. Basically the same construction, except you probably already noticed this has got a decadic tone switch, so we've actually got tone dialing finally. These were much sought after in the 80s, because tone dialing actually does add speed, because it's just beep 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 and done. Whereas the old phone, it's presses the 9 and it's click 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 until it finally gets out the 9 pulses. And this has not only got your, I think that's the volume there, but we can actually change the ringtone on it. So we'll have to get that telephone, build another telephone running kit, the silicon chip more modern one, much like the answering machine tester from Electronics Australia, but a lot more modern, because then you can actually hear what these things sound like. And these had a, yeah, you could change the tone, so I think it was mainly if you had an office or something. It could be just, you know, personal preference, of course, or if you're in an office type environment with multiple phones around, you can make yours sound different to the next guys, so you know whose phone's actually ringing, which was a useful thing when people had more open plan offices and stuff. Oh, come on. I think it's basically the same, but we've probably got a different chip. Oh, there's the CS8205. That's the chip I remember being the ringer chip, so they occasionally got blown up by lightning or something and wouldn't run. You also had transistors to do, these are the later ones, there's a PN222 again, some of them are MSA transistors I think, PN2907, and when you had dialing issues with these phones, or sometimes it would be stuck on I think and like sort of hang up the line, sometimes these little dialing transistors would get shorted out again. It was usually transients up the line from nearby lightning strikes, because even when they hit the ground and it's underground lines, they still pick up voltages off the, if it's a nearby lightning strike, the ground potential rises basically, and that can damage the phone lines. If they're a better earth or whatever, they probably suck some of the lightning down them. So it wasn't uncommon even with underground lines to get issues. AWA PCA, oh yes, it says recall switch there, or it says recall anyway, so that goes to that switch. That is a recall, earth recall I think they called it. Earth something out and would tell the exchange that you wanted a line or something. I think it was something similar when you dialed 0 to get an outside line on some internal phone system, something like that. And we've got a Moztec 8502, which I think it's MK5375CN chip. I remember the brand Moztec, they used to make chips I think. Obviously metal oxide semiconductor tech is up there named after. And yeah, that's basically it. Just got 2 trim pots on this one, same little Alps keyboard, and of course the ringer is now a piezo. So these you gotta pop these little pieces out and then bend these tabs to get it out. I think I've got one already out of a phone I trashed, so I'll grab that one. Okay, here's one I disassembled earlier, which is full of some muck. Picked up something there. But yeah, it's just a little plastic case thing. I haven't actually pulled one apart ever. I don't think. I can unclip it maybe. Does that back come off? Surely I would have pulled one apart once upon a time, but I think it's just a larger than usual piezo type disc, like a little tweeter in a boombox or something. And yeah, all made in Australia. I think these microphones, I think you just peel it back with some side cutters or something. Probably the bigger the better. Though, are these going to fit? Yeah, that was what you had to do. Quite a long job from memory, because it's got to be bent all the way back, all the way around. But yeah, it'd be fascinating to have a look inside one of these. Well, I think it's fascinating anyway. Because yeah, like I said, this was a big technological development at the time. But yeah, they got around 100 years out of the old carbon mics. Yeah, that's it, that's right. It's got the spray on conductive paint and a little earth connector there. And then this should just pull out. And we have an NEC UPC 753C. So that's your little preamp chip, another bridge rectifier. It's got the kind of little dynamic mic. These were quite a good little mic, I think. I seem to remember we pulled some of these out of phones and hooked them up to like boom boxes and stuff on a long wire and recorded things and stuff. We used to mess around recording a few sound effects and bits and pieces, and these were quite a good little dynamic mic, I think. Was it a Primo DM80D2? I think it is DM80D2. Yeah, nice little bridge rectifier there, little S1VB, a little Japanese thing I think, and a few other random parts. Super reliable, I think, these things. I don't think they ever really played up. That's why I don't really mind pulling one to bits. And yeah, the spray on that was kind of a new innovation, I think, back then too. In that sort of mid-80s era was the spray on conductive paint was the thing you could start getting from Dick Smith and stuff. So it just shields it. And yeah, of course you've got your aluminium, but it's just got one little tiny hole to let the sound in. I guess the diaphragm itself probably vibrates a bit too. And obviously made to retrofit. I think these will just retrofit straight into any of these earlier dial phones with the electromechanical dials and bells and everything. I think these, you could just plug these in as an upgrade. And I think Telecom, when they were still fixing some of these old dial phones, may have actually fitted them if the old carbon mic failed. When I think they just used to replace the phone and then refurbish, take the other one back to the workshops and refurbish it, and I think they used to fit these into the old handsets because they're all the same. So yeah, interesting little bit of design. That probably doesn't vibrate much because it's got that rubber piece there pressing against it, so the only bit of the diaphragm that could vibrate is the little central bit. 0686 I guess is the month and the year, and that's about it for those ones. So that sort of covers the standard phones up until they went, I think, around 1987 or somewhere. So not long after these ones came out, they started putting out the touch phone 200s, which is basically this. This is a touch phone 300 or 400. I will do a video on sometime because there's a million different variants of these things. Where is it? TF300. Yeah, this is a slightly later one. The red button version. There's like about 20 or 30 different versions of these, I think, at the minimum. Well, there's probably, you know, 20 main varieties of it. And this is, they originally had the membrane keypad on them rather than these rubber keys. These are a great little phone. Nice, much smaller handset, lighter, smaller, easy to hold in your shoulder. Squeeze between ear and shoulder. You sort of lift your shoulder up to hold that bit. They did actually make a thing for these ones, a stick-on piece, so you could rest it on your shoulder easily and sort of hold it with it and keep both hands free. And of course, I don't think any of these Telecom models came with hands free. There were aftermarket phones. I was stoked in the sort of early 90s when I was working at that TR place. It was a faulty Easy Call or something phone. Don't know where it came from, but because it was there before any of us working there were there. But it was, I can't remember what was wrong. I think it had a blown transistor of some sort in it, but I actually was given it, and that had a hands-free phone. I think I've actually found it in the Dick Smith catalogue, and it was a $200 or $300 phone at the time. And it's really good to have hands-free phones, so I use that as my home phone. But that was quite a feature back then. They normally were hundreds of dollars to get a hands-free phone. I think the Telecom one, they made a very fancy one from Fujitsu or someone out of Japan. That it was like an executive telephone, fluorescent display, inbuilt calculator, and of course some of the Commander type systems or other PABX systems had it. But what year is this one? This is this is much later, 98, 99. But this was a style of phone that became the standard Telecom phone right up until, I'm not sure when, in the 2000s. But I think it was almost to like 2008 or something. They went to the 400 after this. The first ones were the touch phone 200. And then they changed to the T1000 phones for a few years before basically they went off the market altogether. And these were made, they started off as AWA made. This one's an Alcatel. There was, trying to think what the other company was now. I just looked at a heap of them yesterday. There was Alcatel, yeah, then Exicom was, I think, the second ones. Don't know if any of these had STC on them, but the early ones were AWA in the 87, 88, or 86, 87, 88, somewhere around there. Then a lot of it went to Exicom, which I think took over from AWA's telephone manufacturing. Some of them I think were made in parallel with Alcatel as well, which I think is a French company, or at least had both brands. Alcatel may have taken over Exicom, or Exicom went broke, I think. One of them went broke. Then Alcatel took over by Thompson or something later on, and that's what the later T1000 phones, some of them are made. So there's all these varieties of these AWA, Alcatel, Exicoms, and then heaps of different varieties of these, the keypad setups and the like. So I'm going to try and get a collection of all the main types. And I didn't have a lot to do with these ones as far as inside. There's nothing overly exciting in them. Yeah, they've got a switchable ringer pitch on some, they've got a volume for the ringer, and then they have some other modes like normal phone line or long line or 600 ohm, which I think was a PABX type one. And these handsets can be pulled apart, but very difficult to actually get apart from memory. I think you've got to bend the hell out of them. There is a bit of a clip thing there, possibly. Might have to try pulling. I've got a few old ones that I might try pulling one apart just for the hell of it. These later ones had an actual RJ plug there. So you could actually, so they didn't have as much wastage if the cords got faulty, because it plugs in an RJ there. The early ones, they were hardwired in there and you'd have to change the whole handset, which I guess is probably a bit wasteful, given that, you know, people do stretch these cords and damage them and stuff, so maybe they got sick of replacing the whole handset. And these were actually both in rental version, does this one say, and manufactured for Telstra Technology, so this is a sale one. Yeah, service and assistance with this product, free call number, it's got the old Austil permit. But they actually started making these available, you could buy them, I think around $99 a lot of them were. Tandy sold them, Dick Smith sold them, Telecom Shop sold them, and Tandy had like some different coloured. These came out, some in red, which I don't think was sold to the public. There is a black version I think out there, which again very rare. I think the main public ones were the white or ivory or whatever they call this one. There was a grey, I think, and a beigey, browny, yellow sort of one. I think that might have been the main colours they sold. The red ones would go for quite good money on eBay if anyone comes across one of those in good condition. A lot of these are all kind of yellowed from the sun, so that's why this one's sitting there, because I might pull the case off and see if I can electro-bright this one. Basically some of these have the little flip up piece. The later ones just have a plastic piece because you can lift that up to do your phone number label. So that's got the original one that someone's written on there. Someone's flipped it upside down to get rid of the original writing. So you've got to do this little door and the outer case bit. Also the handset will have to be done, which might mean it gets wet or somewhat wet, and then you've got to unclip this other piece around the keypad, because that's a separate piece again. So they're a bit of a pain to pull apart, but if we can get some of these whitened up a bit, it'd be good, because there's no way you'll ever get new ones of all these. There are still some new ones around in boxes, but not that common. Then eventually I'll get a whole pile of these phones sorted out and maybe do a video, because I want to actually make a display of these somewhere, because it's quite interesting how many of these later white ones there are, far more than the earlier phones, which only had a few varieties. These things have endless varieties over the years, but they did go from, like I say, around 87 I think to almost 2007 I guess, so they had a good long run. But I mean the earlier ones did too, they just didn't change things much in those days, whereas these days it's so much easier to change things, and they kept upgrading the phone exchanges at a much faster rate, so that sort of changed things. All these extra features, which is why I started getting more buttons. They had all the easy call features. Most of these end up with 8 buttons on them, and then of course here, calling number display. Even though you could buy, I actually purchased a, rather than having I just had, I think, a Touchphone 400 similar to this, and I think for about $50 at Dick Smith or somewhere you could buy a calling number display little box that just, I think it plugged in line with the phone. And then later on I spotted I forget what it was a Telecom, sort of another executive type phone at Cash Converters or somewhere at a decent price, and I bought that with inbuilt calling number display and had that for years, and that was handy, especially when you've got a business, just to see if someone's ringing on the weekend or something while you're there. You don't want to answer just any old call, or if it's spammers and stuff, which you got lots of. Always good to check if it was a local number. If it's a mainland number, you already just tell them to go away when you answered it. As soon as you expect them to ask, is the manager there or something, and then you could just say not interested and hang up on them, which upset a few of them, but too bad. Anyway, we'll get onto that later, so thanks for watching.